Serial killers so often work alone in acting out their disturbing fantasies. The memory of their crime often remains a deep secret until they're caught. But what if the killer shared these memories with one of their most trusted family members? A family member who has the same dark fantasies and impulses as their siblings. These are 3 horrific serial killing siblings. Pat Bondurant and Pete Bondurant are American serial killers responsible for the deaths of 3 women who they all murdered in 1 year. The twins were first convicted of the 1986 murder of Gwen Duggar before their other crimes were unearthed. Gwen and her brother, Ken, had gone to the Bondurant farmhouse to pick up his car that had broken down at their home, where teens often came to get drugs. Pete was able to convince the girl into staying at the house while her brother left with his car. He then kept giving Gwen drugs until she became incapacitated, after which Pete took her into the home's washroom to rape her with his brother Pat. Pat's wife Denise Bondurant would catch the brothers raping the nearly unconscious girl. She later saw Gwen passed out on the farmhouse's floor, where she tried to help the drugged girl leave. But Pat walked up to the two and started beating Gwen with an axe handle until she was bloodied and bruised. After the beating, Pete walked up to the girl and said that he was going to put her out of her misery. He then shot her twice with a .22 caliber pistol. Denise was so terrified of the brothers at this point that she followed their orders and began scrubbing the blood off the farmhouse's floor and walls. The brothers took Gwen's body to the edge of the Elk River, where they placed it in a 55-gallon barrel and burned it until all that remained were her bones and ashes, which they threw into the river. It took until 1990, where Denise, who had separated with Pat, came forward to testify against the brothers. The brothers were sentenced to 25 years in prison for second-degree murder, only being spared a life sentence because Gwen's body has never been found. Pat and Pete were also convicted in relation to the death of Pat's co-worker, Ronnie Gaines. Pat had confessed to Denise that he had beaten Gaines to death, and that Pete had helped him burn and dismember his co-worker's body, and then bury it in the yard of their parents' cabin. Pat was convicted of first-degree murder, and Pete was also charged for helping dispose of the body. The brothers' third victim was finally uncovered later, when Pete was charged for the murder of his ex-girlfriend, Terry Lynn Clark, and was given a 15-year extension on his sentence. As of 2017, Pat Bondurant is still incarcerated in the Northeast Correctional Complex in Mountain City, 10, but his brother, Pete Bondurant, was released on December 21st, 2016, after living out his sentence. His current location is unknown. Shen Chang-ying and Shen Chang-ping are Chinese serial killers responsible for the deaths of 11 women. Their murder spree began in June of 2003, where they lured a prostitute named Yao Fang into their home. They tied her up and forced her to tell them her bank account PIN, and after confirming that she was telling them the real PIN, they strangled and dismembered her. In November of 2003, Li Chengling, who was the brothers' second would-be victim, was able to escape her death after she convinced the brothers that she would bring them more prostitutes to steal and murder from. Li made good on her promise and brought 4 prostitutes to the brothers' home over the course of several months. The Chen brothers would rob and murder their victims, sometimes making Li kill them herself. They would then remove their victims' kidneys and eat them, and afterwards the brothers would take the remains, burn it in sulfuric acid, and flush it down the toilet. Their killings continued in this fashion until all three of the murderers moved to Taiyang, Chanchi, where the brothers found another person to aid them in their murder spree in the form of Zhao Meiying. Their new helper lured their first victim into the brothers' home, where they forced her to stab the prostitute to death. The brothers would then feed the prostitute's body into a meat processor, and the remaining pieces of her body would be flushed down the toilet. Zhao surrendered to police in 2004, which was soon followed by Li's capture in relation to the crimes committed by the Shen brothers. The group continued their killing spree throughout several different Chinese cities, where they picked up 2 more helpers and murdered several more women. In August of 2004, Chinese police raided the brothers' apartment, where they found both of the siblings and their newest helper named Du Serong in the presence of a woman's corpse, which they had brutally dismembered. The brothers confessed to police that they had murdered 11 women during their killing spree. 3 women who acted as the brothers' helpers were sentenced to 3 to 20 years in prison for luring the women into the Shen's apartment. Shen Changying, Shen Changping, and Li Chengling were all sentenced to death in 2005. Delfina and Maria de Jesus Gonzalez are Mexican serial killers responsible for the murders of around 110 people. Another pair of sisters, Carmen and Maria Luisa Gonzalez Valenzuela, also had a large role to play in the Gonzalez sisters' brutal serial killing career. The sisters' brutality started when they purchased several secret bars and brothels across Mexico. The sisters hired their staff through unconventional means. Sometimes they prowled the countryside in search for the most beautiful young women. They would then offer them jobs as waitresses or maids, although they wouldn't be the jobs they eventually got. Other times they would kidnap young women who would never be heard from again. Whichever way the woman came into their service, they all ended up in the same hell. Virgins were saved for clients who were willing to pay a lot of money to have sex with them. The other women were raped, intimidated, and were showered in ice water as their initiation. The women had no contact with the outside world and would have to buy their clothes and makeup from the Gonzalez sisters. They kept in line because of Delfina's son, Raymond Torres, who served as an enforcer for the women in their brothels. The Gonzalez sisters kept the business running for years, selling alcohol and sex to soldiers, councilmen, police, and villagers. Whenever one of their sex workers became pregnant, they would be beaten and forced to abort it. The fetus would be dumped in the backyards or buried. If a worker became too sick from malnutrition, an STD, or an abortion, they were locked in a room and starved to death, or beaten to death, by the other sex workers who were forced to do so by their captors. The bodies would then be burned or buried in mass graves. Clients with a lot of money would be murdered and buried in order for the sisters to claim all of their cash. Delfina's son, Raymond Torres, allegedly got into an argument with one of the police officers in the area. The argument escalated until the officer shot Torres to death inside of one of the Gonzalez sisters' brothels. The police closed down the brothel, and in a fit of rage, Delfina ordered the death of the police officers responsible for her son's death. The order was carried out, and it's believed the officer responsible is dead. In January of 1964, one of the sisters' sex workers escaped their brothel through a small hole in the wall. The Gonzalez's men searched for the girl in order to kill her, but they lost her in the countryside. She was able to go to a police department which hadn't been corrupted by the sisters' influence, and the sisters' main brothel, Loma del Angel Ranch, was raided. Police found dozens of malnourished, emaciated, and dirty women locked in a room at the ranch. The brothel is often compared to a concentration camp due to its harsh and brutal conditions. The women on the ranch pointed to areas on the ground where they'd find mass graves made by the sisters. When the graves were dug up, police found the skeletons of at least 91 women, men, and fetuses. The women accused the sisters of Satanism, forcing them to practice sex with animals, and torturing dozens of men and women. The sisters were sentenced to 40 years in prison, although not many would live through their sentencing. Delfina Gonzalez Valenzuela went insane from the paranoia that she would be lynched by an angry mob, and on October 17, 1968, workers doing repairs above her cell looked down and saw her ranting inside her cell. The workers accidentally dropped a bucket of cement on her head, killing her. Maria Luisa Gonzalez Valenzuela died alone in her cell on November 19, 1984. Her body was found 1 day later and had already been eaten by the prison's rats. Maria de Jesus Gonzalez Valenzuela was the only one of the sisters who lived out her sentence, and it's believed that she died of old age in the 1990s. Another mass grave was found in 2004, where they found about 20 skeletons in the pit. This raised the Gonzalez's body count to over 110 people.